welcome to Peers to Pillars, a podcast where we share stories of suicide loss, suicide attempt, sometimes a little bit of both, the ups and downs, the ins and outs of navigating this experience, of looking for support, of looking for resources. We get into it all. I'm Shannon Donick. I'm your host. I am also the founder and CEO of Pillar, a nonprofit which provides peer support after suicide. Thank you for being here. This is a heavier topic, so please listen. If you feel ready, if you're in a place where you can take this in. Hopefully, though, this is meant for folks who really need to be able to connect with the community of suicide loss survivors and suicide attempt survivors, and you're maybe feeling a little bit hesitant, a little bit worried. There's so many obstacles in our way in reaching out to finding those supports and resources that we need. My hope is that this podcast will make it a little bit easier for you to listen on your own terms, sign in and watch these videos on your own terms. My hope is that something will speak to you and you'll be able to take that forward. I do go into a little bit more about how and why this podcast came to be on a separate episode. So I'll link to that in the show notes where I can. Hopefully you can find that video or you can find that episode wherever you are taking in this content. But again, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your support as well. This is very new to me. I don't know what I'm doing out here, but I'm very excited to be able to try to connect with you in this way. For today's episode, I'm so glad to be joined by Nikki Alonso-Scott, who happens to be the board president of Pillar as well. She and I have been we met originally in 2016. We mentioned that in the podcast. So we've actually known each other for a long time. We've been working together in and out in this area of supporting suicide loss survivors ever since. She lost her mom to suicide 25 years ago. And so she really takes us through that experience from day one up until now. And for her, it actually involved a complete career change. So she's now a therapist in the Nashville area, and I'll link to her so that anyone out there who's near her, if you want to reach out to her, please feel free. So grateful to Nikki to joining us, and so grateful to all of you. I'll go ahead and let us just jump right in. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Peers to... Wait, I just forgot what it's called. Peers to Pillars, right?
You have to leave that in. The bloopers are the best part. People love that.
Thank you for being here. My name is Shannon Donick. I'm your host, and I am with Nikki from Nashville. I always just mention where people are from because I find it fascinating. This is my boomer tendency. Find it fascinating that we can connect from all over.
I know.
But you're in Nashville. I'm in Brooklyn.
I know. I'd much rather be in Brooklyn.
Well, thanks for being here on the very first
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. Yes.
Glad that you're here with me because we might as well tell our listeners that we know each other pretty well. We actually met. It was September, actually. It was this month in 2016.
August, September.
Yeah, in Chicago at a conference for long-term loss survivors. And so, I know you've had just hundreds, probably thousands of conversations with loss survivors and myself as well. And it's just, there's been times where I'm talking with someone and they're sharing their story where it would just be this magical connection. And I thought to myself, how is it that we're the only ones in this conversation? It just seems like we should be able, that only other folks could hear this because, and I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit of just, it's really scary to reach out for support after suicide. It's really, it's nerve-wracking. It's just really hard to find what's available to me. The hope is a podcast like this, a place where folks are sharing their story and people don't have to do anything in order to have access to those stories, right? People can just put on their headphones. They can be walking around the neighborhood. They could be going on a run. They could be on the train, they're listening to stories. And my hope is that gives them a little bit of what it would feel like, a little bit of that connection and support that you would get at a support group.
Hmm.
that you would get by reaching out to some of these places that offer support after suicide that might, someone is maybe just not sure if they want to do that yet or not sure if
Yeah.
they're ready or just, again, not, maybe there's not one in their area. My hope is that if they can just listen and it starts to give them that feeling that, we each have our own unique story. There's a lot of nuances
Right.
to each person's grief or each person's recovery, but also there's a lot of just universal experiences in there too. And so
Hmm.
to feel like you're going through something completely alone and then you listen to someone share something that you were like, "Whoa, I thought I was the only person who did this." It really feels good. Feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm not out here by myself. And so anyways, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, not everyone likes a group either. No,
Yeah.
not everybody wants to be in a group room filled sharing the most difficult details of life. A podcast or a peer one on one is always another great option that
Yeah.
I wish I had. I wish I had anything 25 years ago.
Completely. Completely. Yeah, I mean, so maybe that's our segue. If you're ready, like let's maybe just get right into it. If you want to maybe share a little bit about who it was you lost, when, where were you, where was
Hmm.
she, what were things looking
Hmm.
like, and we'll
Yeah.
move forward to 25 years. You said.
Yeah. I'm Nikki. I lost my mom, Viola, 25 years ago this year. December 3rd will be 25 years. So heading into fall season starts to kick off some of my what my body remembers as anxiety and the hesitation of what's coming because the last time I saw her was on Thanksgiving Day.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And it was also when our families, my now ex-spouse and our families met for the first time because we had gotten engaged. So there was a lot happening in
Yeah.
that moment,
Yeah.
and a lot of milestones were happening in that moment that I didn't even realize were happening. But I lost her. I was born and raised in California. So I was living in Oakland, California, I had just graduated from graphic design school, which I have a sordid history. Okay, nothing matches. I'll just tell you that.
Yeah.
My
Spoiler.
first
Like.
degree was in graphic design, and she was living in my hometown, which was about 2 hours south of us, and grew up Filipino American. And so culturally, we don't talk about mental health. We talk to each other, and Filipinos are very much like giving and warm, but we keep our stuff with our circle. Like, we don't talk about that because we don't want people to think we're not good enough or we have
Mm-hmm.
problems or there's drama, which can be accounted for many families of any culture. But yeah, she died on December 3rd, and every December 3rd at about 5 a.m. when it's still dark outside, I tend to wake up even 25 years later and I feel whatever I'm going to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's big and sometimes it's not so big.
Mm-hmm.
But back then there was nothing. There
Mm-hmm.
was no support groups. There was no like
Mm-hmm.
resources. We're just getting started. But there wasn't anything, and there was a lot of stigma, and you didn't say suicide. And nobody could sit with the enormity of that grief with me.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody. And, in this country, anyways, we're expected to get over grief in 3 days.
Yep.
Friday, you have the wake, Saturday, you have the service, and Sunday, you have people over, and then Monday, you go back to work and you're fine. And it's not the way it goes.
Yeah.
And so no one could sit with me in that. And I couldn't even sit with me in that. So I just shut it all down,
Mm-hmm.
and made everyone else comfortable with
Totally.
um, whatever I was not allowed to feel for 8 years.
Also, I mean,
For
you
eight
were
years.
young, so you were
I was
probably,
25.
yeah,
Yeah.
you were trying to protect people from not just from suicide, but just from loss at all. I'm sure you were probably the
Right.
first in your group of friends to lose a parent. You're
Yeah.
just, you
Right.
know what that's like when people start to like to you their condolences, and then somehow in a matter of minutes
You
it turns
flip it.
around
Yeah.
and you're comforting them. Like, I'm sorry
Yep.
you had to get this information right now.
Right.
Like, so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely that. Like, now you're taking care of somebody else's feelings because nobody can take care of yours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 25. I was 25. So this is another milestone in this
Yeah.
grief. And going forward after this year, I will now forever live longer than I had her.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I thought about this many years ago, like, what's it going to be like when it's 25 years?
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought about that, and I don't know what to think about it now that I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
It's heavy, and it's caught me all year where I have moments of like, you feel the gravity of it in your chest and in your stomach. And then you move on, and then the gravity comes back and you move on. And as it's inching closer. So I'm wondering what is going to happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I every year has been different for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
But
But yeah, so eight
in that
years.
8 years, I found a support group in California, randomly opened our local newspaper when we still had them. And the front page was this woman who had lost her son, and she was starting a support group, and to call this number if you wanted to be part of it. And she and I connected and like instantly bonded, because as you do when you have no one else
Yeah.
who
Oh,
completely
yeah.
understands.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it over and over again. And she asked me to be the co-facilitator, which I was like, sure, but I have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
Also, I'm probably not the healthiest person to do this, and had no idea because I hadn't grieved at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd walk into those support groups, which were twice a month, and I would bawl my eyes out the entire hour and a half, and then for about 3 days after, because I
Mm.
was finally being allowed.
Yep.
And I remember my spouse at the time just looking at me like, again, like I was crazy. Like, do you need to go to the doctor? Do you need medication? And it's like, no, I'm actually just grieving now. And I don't care if you can't handle it. I'm just going to do it. Like, I can't even turn it off at this
Mm-hmm.
point. Fast forward many years, we moved to Nashville, found a support group again, and just completely kept getting involved over and over again. Trained as a crisis counselor. I trained as a facilitator, finally got actual training to be a facilitator. And then there are these walks here that are for suicide loss survivors. And I registered for that. First, I contacted the people to see if I could start a walk here because it wasn't started here. And they sent me this binder that was like gigantic. And I had just moved here, and I was like, well, I have no help and I'm not going
Yeah.
to be able to do this. So I sent it back. And then the next year, someone had started one
Okay.
and registered for that walk for like 5 years. And I never went. And I made excuses every year. Like, oh, it's too cold. Oh, the kids are sick. Oh, I can't go. Oh, I have to do this instead. Finally, on the 6th year, I got 2 friends to go with me, and they held me accountable, and they made me go. And then I think we started their peer program here. And I found it to be so incredibly helpful for every person that I met. But going to one of those walks and then seeing the thousands of people start the walk and standing behind group, it's in, like, yeah, I can't even, there's no words.
Yeah.
You just catch your breath. You're like, okay, in a place where I have always felt alone, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And also, it's another level of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this is true. This happened. And all these people can see
And mm-hmm.
it's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
that's really
devastating.
it's completely devastating. I lost my grandma to suicide, which was just really kind
Mm-hmm.
of my I usually use that as the descriptor, which is I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people tend to use their first loss as the descriptor, but really,
Mm-hmm.
once you've been a human, quite frankly, for a long enough time, you've had other
Yeah,
losses, you've lost other folks.
absolutely.
But, me, I was a kid, so it was a long, long time ago, and where I'm going with this is just there are so many different pieces of suicide loss that are devastating, but
Mm-hmm.
honestly, it's like what you describe is for me now anyways, for where I'm at now in this world, it really makes me so sad actually to see that there's that many people. It's like on the one hand you
Yeah.
look around when you're at a walk or where you're at a large conference, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's these things where we'll all have a lot of loss survivors get together, and it's like, wow, like we really are a force and we're here together to
Mm-hmm.
support each other. And so it's wonderful, but it just hits you that like this is so still, it's
Yeah.
just not talked about, it's just not accepted. You for how long you walked around feeling alone, how long I walked around feeling alone,
Yeah.
how many folks walked around feeling they were all alone. Thank goodness like you got to that point where you were
Right.
truly able to see all these people together, and that's so beautiful and so powerful. But it's also like, man, like we're all just like hiding this really important thing.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know. Just
And the
memory
truth
love.
is, on that note, hiding an important thing, the truth is even as many as you see at those events, that's not all of them because a lot of them won't come out, won't
Yeah.
participate, won't acknowledge, won't talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
sweep it under the rug, don't
Yeah.
face it.
Yeah.
And, you know, if there's anything I can tell you after trying to run from it for 8 years, is it will find you.
Yes.
Even when you think you've done enough or you've done some, it will keep finding you until, I mean, it's never done. The truth is, it's never done. The grief is never done. And like you said, life keeps happening. Whether you lose more people by death or you lose relationships or jobs or careers or whatever it is, like that grief is always
Mm-hmm.
tapped back into. It's like the first moment, but
Mm-hmm.
it's always a touchstone back to any type of grief, is what I have found, anyways.
Yeah. Mentioned how you're aware every year of the
Mm-hmm.
anniversary, because not everyone is quote unquote bad. Not everyone is like really rough, but you're always gonna like feel something, and you may as well just like be prepared and make note of that. So whether
Right.
ever anniversaries, and especially for new loss survivors, that's why it's usually like the first. We always say like the first year is a fog because your whole body is going through the shock
Right.
of losing someone in such an
Absolutely.
abrupt way. Really like that second year that you start to become aware of like
Oh, the
what.
second year's the worst.
Yes,
Worse than the first. Everybody says that.
absolutely, because now you're actually aware of
Right.
the like
You're actually awake now.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like what are the anniversaries, what are the holidays, what are the birthdays that
Mm-hmm.
are gonna make me feel something. But certainly time goes on, it's not always gonna feel like that, but it might. There's like some years you're just like, oh, we're doing this one again. So
Yeah.
all of this to say, I think I just think it's really smart to kind of just make a note of that day. Just be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
You might
Right.
not maybe have to take off of work every year, but
No.
maybe maybe if you can have that option, maybe try not to put like the biggest thing on that.
Right.
um
I find the lead up days are worse than the
mm,
actual day for
yeah.
most people, is like they don't even know why they're so emotional and dysregulated or angry or sad, or and then the day comes and they're like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like people discount the impact of how your body knows. Like I've read this over and over again in therapy books. It's like grief and trauma don't have a timeline. They just know the feeling.
Mm.
And so your body knows before your brain knows. Like before
Mm-hmm.
you've comprehended what's coming, your body already is preparing. Like it just knows.
Mm-hmm.
And so that week before that, most people are like, oh, I had no idea why I was so emotional. And then the day came, you're like, oh, yeah. And it's like, it doesn't just have to be that day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you remember what you were doing, what was
Yeah.
happening.
Well, because I thought it was. I wanted to come back to what you said at the beginning. Like you have an awareness of the seasons changing. That's
Mm-hmm.
something
The
again. Like
smell, yeah.
yes, the smell, the way that the
Feel
light, kind of
air.
changes.
Mhm.
Something.
Darker earlier. Yeah, all of
Yeah,
that.
because your body remembers, your mind is remembering, and so you're kind of starting to get back to that person that you were then. And so again, like that's something like we often are reminding folks to just be aware when the seasons change, because
Mm-hmm.
it might maybe you're still a couple months out from the
Yeah,
state that you're kind of mentally preparing yourself for, but it's coming,
right.
and so it's just going to start to feel differently. So well, and for you, I think we should also mention then that, you kind of teased it at the beginning. This all led as you were getting more and more involved in supporting others through, after suicide loss and grief,
Mm-hmm.
and getting more in touch with your own grieving process. You had a total career change.
I did. I thought that volunteering and working with loss survivors and I facilitated support group for like 5 years. I thought that was enough for me to feel like I was doing and feeding a passion of mine. I also stopped halfway, not halfway, like in 2020, I kind of stopped all of that volunteering because I was like, am I impeding my healing by
Mm.
doing this? Am I
Mm-hmm.
stuck? And I find a lot of people clients, and I will explain why I have clients, a lot of them bring this up. Like, am I in my own way? Should I be grieving more? Am I not grieving enough? Am I avoiding it? And I think it's a valid question that all of us in any kind of grief kind of stop and like, why do I feel okay? Because grief shouldn't feel okay, right? And that's a whole other conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped volunteering and then I decided to go get a master's degree in counseling. So in the middle of the pandemic, at age 47, I decided this would be a great idea.
But it was.
It was, and it is the most fulfilling thing I have ever done. Just earlier this year, again, I stopped volunteering because I needed to focus, and I was finding my passion for some of what I was being involved in was not the same, and I wanted to go a different direction. And suddenly, like literally right after that, I think I got 3 or 4 new clients who are all loss survivors.
Mm.
They just showed up. And oddly, in this small community of therapists, there's not a lot that are well versed on grief and especially well versed on suicide loss. And if they are, I don't know about it because nobody's talking about it. So I have clients that seek me out or are told about the type of grief work and trauma I do. And so I focus on complex trauma, grief, loss, suicide, loss survivors, multicultural issues, and trauma. So that's kind of what I do. And so now I've got all these clients. And then to me, it was like, okay, so if I'm not doing it at a nonprofit huge level, I'm doing it one-on-one.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed to do. And it's amazing how similar the thinking is from person to person, but also, like you said, the nuance of everyone's story is so different. They all have these major thoughts, like just typing in suicide support is like a whole thing no one wants to bring up on Google, but they need it. That's a form of acceptance too, to just do that. But I love my clients. And, I think a lot of people are like, why do you keep sticking yourself into this? Like, why do you keep traumatizing or sticking yourself into the worst memory of your life? And it's like, because I have to remember where this started. To relate to my clients, I have to remember the rawness of all of that. And I know further down the line what it's like, to not be in those first days or that first year. Like, more is coming. And some of it positive, some of it negative. It's kind of how you choose to take it, And I've always said she didn't die in vain, so I found my place in it. And so now I see people and I love my job. And you started this nonprofit, and I thought, I'm just going to let go of this part of my life, right? Like, I'm just going to go be a therapist and do one-on-one. And then I see yours pop up and I was like, oh, I'm so proud of her. And at first I was just like, I'm just going to be support. Like, I just want to be her cheerleader in the corner. And then I reached out to you and and then I was like, well, I'll just volunteer, because I was looking for a volunteer gig and I couldn't find anything. Like, I've tried and I couldn't find anything that stuck. And I was like, I'm just going to tell her if she needs volunteers, which she will, because that's what it's based off of. I will do it. And now it's like a whole other level that I was not expecting.
I wasn't either, but hey, we're gonna do this. But because you touched on a few things that I wanna highlight even more. I mean, we both have been in this space for a while now, so burnout is a very real thing. Really need to be aware of when you need to take a step back. And so you've mentioned there's been times when you kind of already had stepped away. So hopefully now that we've both been through our own periods of burnout, we'll recognize it, and we'll just need to be more gentle with ourselves, and certainly making the space for others who continue to join us here. But also there is a reason to come back. There constantly is a reason to come back. It really is. It's just such a powerful community, and I mean, truly, like you just. It is so hard to find the support when you need it in those early days, and it is so terrifying. I know I keep saying this, but it's like we've had these conversations with people over and over of just the amount of times that I've talked with new loss survivors, and their biggest worry is just how to walk into the room when there's a support group, which I completely appreciate. And there was a point when I was facilitating a support group it was like way in the basement of an old church, which is like, I feel
Fitting.
like sort of always, I feel like every support group somehow meets in the oldest church in the neighborhood in the basement. So it was like, so we would make sure to describe, like, you're gonna have to come down the stairs, like a ton of stairs, and then you have to pull on the really heavy door. It was just like, can we make this like any worse? But like
any more metaphorical, like, right?
But truly, like if I can at least give you, like, help you picture that, because that is really like the toughest part. And then thank goodness you're gonna walk into this group of strangers who are immediately somehow the most important people to you. You know, it's gonna be worth it. But I don't know. I'm so curious too, like the experience of studying, you know, truly like studying therapy, studying therapeutic approaches, learning so much more as someone who has been through all this, but also probably just thinking of your earlier self who shut it off for 8 years. You know, I'm so curious.
Sadly, across the board, there is not a lot taught about, one, grief, two, suicide or suicide loss or suicide attempt. Like, it's very clinical because it becomes very scary. And without them like saying this is scary, it's like just the word, the stigmatizing word of suicide, scary for a therapist, because that's the worst possible thing that could happen to you as a therapist, right?
Yeah.
And so we tend to make it clinical, pathological. We tend to like worry about liability, safety plans, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I actually just did a Zoom with interns at one of the state universities here, and we talked about prevention, intervention, and postvention. And I really honed in, as therapists, yes, you want to run and be scared and then get all your safety plans and check your liability insurance and all of that, and then tell your supervisor. But what they don't tell you, they tell you all the modalities of therapy in masters. The thing that I have learned the most that is not in any of the books, connection is the healer for trauma. So if you can sit with your client who is suicidal and not make it scary for you and them, and just talk to that person about why they feel like this. Like, be there, validate, yeah, this sucks, this is hard, I can see why you feel like you have no way out. I'm right here. You're not alone, in fact, because you're looking at another person. If we can just do that, sorry, my AirPod fell off. If we can just do that with people, 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to say every time, but they're going to walk out of the room and that ideation is off the table, because you've just sat with them in the enormous amount of feelings, and that's all they really wanted. I want to connect.
Completely agree. And I mean, we're finally at the point where we're getting more concrete studies coming out to prove this, that it's the Therapeutic Alliance over at not. And that, you know, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I otherwise would have forgotten that it's so important for us to talk about this. That you're exactly right. There is this whole country, maybe world, the word suicide is terrifying, and it is still for us. You know, if still my heart races if someone's telling me they're thinking about killing themselves. Like, it's not something that you feel comfortable with. It's like, it's definitely terrifying. But that's us. Like, that's where we have to just like reel it back, because we immediately, for whatever reason, it's probably, you know, a combination of things. When we get terrified about something like that, we want to do the right thing to help this person. So we put this pressure on ourselves that we have to say the right word to save their life. And what you're bringing up is, it's not about these exact words. Like, the connection to this person who's actually taking the time to be there, to sit there in this pain. And that's creating what's called the therapeutic alliance between your therapist and yourself. And that's the more powerful part. And it's not, because also I think everyone has been suicidal, but we all have something. There's those struggles that we have. And so you can just think of, like, for anyone who's been having like a really rough day, a really rough time, you can remember the person who was sitting with you versus like
Yeah.
whether or not they had the most eloquent, language to guide you through that. So
Right.
it's kind of similar situation. And I'm glad you brought that up because there are, therapists really are so nervous about this, and you
Hmm.
worded it so well as to just, to be there with them. And maybe
Absolutely.
just mentioning, maybe if you want to like, you would maybe advise to other therapists who, for any therapist who might be listening, of just because I know this
Right.
is a concern for them, like maybe what could they do to better prepare themselves for speaking with
Right.
someone.
Let's see. Most survivors think that they need a therapist who is also a survivor of loss,
Mm.
suicide loss. And that's not true. I had a therapist for 3 years. I still to this day don't know if she ever lost anyone to suicide, but she could sit with the enormity of my grief and my trauma, and she was trauma trained and trauma informed.
Mm-hmm.
And she just let me be who I needed to be in those sessions. And we did EMDR, and we dug up some horrible memories that I had repressed, and it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder maybe even than the actual event, because I was now not dissociated and like totally present for
Mm-hmm.
all those
Yeah.
feelings. But if I were to tell therapists, be trauma informed,
Mm-hmm.
don't worry about the safety plan so much.
Mm.
Know, of course, know who their supports are, but don't make that the most important thing. Know their protective factors, know their risk factors. Yes, of course, but that can't be
Mm-hmm.
the only conversation in the room, because you're dismissing what they're there for.
I'm you that's exactly what I was looking for. I was kind of fishing for that just because like I have a therapist who I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely adore. I've been seeing him for a long time. He's trauma trained, and it's the same sort of I just really think like and even when I talk to friends or our colleagues who are therapists who will reach out if they're concerned that they're talking to someone who's suicidal or who is,
Mm-hmm.
if they're suicide loss survivor and their grief seems pretty intense, and they're worried about it. I usually mention like just like look into like anything related to trauma because
Yeah.
therapist, also not a background in suicide, but uh, he was prepared to sit with me with whatever I was bringing up
Yeah.
and didn't run away from it even when I turned into a total pain in the ass because it's very, like you just mentioned, when these feelings come up, which that's the whole point of going to therapy is to like to bring them
Right.
up. But then they're there. What am I supposed
Yeah.
to do with
Now
it?
what? Here they are. You asked for them.
Oh, yeah, I mean, truly, I think we're just gonna. I'm glad that we're talking about this because we've been talking a lot about the peer support, which is so important and we're both so passionate about. But
Mm-hmm.
we also, when possible, and I know that's a whole can of worms as to like how accessible, how possible it is for folks to actually get to therapy. But
Mm-hmm.
if at all possible, for suicide loss and suicide attempt, to have both, to be able
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, see a trained professional to kind of guide you through in a way that they're trained to do, and that you won't be able to get the guidance from a therapist anywhere else. But
Mm-hmm.
a peer is also just to just sit with someone who's been there, kind of like
Yeah.
I think you were saying it earlier, of just all of a sudden, like that first phone call that you had when you
Mm-hmm.
first talk to someone who you've got this, if you can feel like a secret, or even if it's not a secret, it's just it's a weight that you're carrying. This experience
Right.
that you had, this person that you love is gone, and it feels like you can't. Everyone else kind of like is probably expecting you to move on, or is just maybe hoping that you move on because
Right.
the experience of being around you is making them uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk to someone who's been there, who gets it, who can listen to you just as you're describing your situation, they're nodding along saying, "Yep, I remember that. I
Yeah.
remember that."
Yep.
It's so soothing. But, so again, to have both of those experiences, to be able to connect with your peers where they just there's just an absolute understanding, and then also to get that guidance from from a trained professional. Because I mean,
Right.
yeah, you mentioned EMDR. And I mean, truthfully too, if you're a newer loss survivor, or if you're just beginning to unpack some of this trauma and grief, medication may be completely
Absolutely.
appropriate. Completely appropriate.
Please
Yes, if you are prescribed for medication, please
don't
take
stop
it.
taking it because it's summer.
Yes, truly. Oh my gosh. Take the medication. There's no shame. Like
No.
there is absolutely, this is gonna help you. This is gonna help you feel better.
This comes up so much in therapy, and 100% bigger topic with people of color who don't want to take medication because
Mm,
mom or grandma said don't take the crazy pills.
interesting.
And now we have to unlearn that
Yeah.
to get to possible life-saving, healthier way of life
Yeah.
because you can take a medication to calm some of the noise in your head.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to take that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like I feel like I say this a lot, and I often worry about saying it because I'm like, does that simplify it too much? But I think it's something that we all need to keep reminding ourselves. Like, if like I recently broke my foot, so it's
Hmm.
like had no choice but to go
Hmm.
to a foot surgeon and then do whatever he says. It's like I don't know. I don't know how to fix my broken bones, and
Right.
I wouldn't ever expect myself to. I wouldn't expect like other. This is so obvious, right? We break a bone, we have heart disease, we have
Hmm.
cancer. Like we go to the
We'll
experts,
do it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why do we continue to think that we're supposed to just be able to like think our way
Power,
out of these yeah, power through
power
these,
through.
like when our brain is acting up and our heart and our
Right.
soul, like why, so
And really just gaslight ourselves
and
into
gaslight. I am
into like, stop thinking that way. You don't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. That's dumb. Like,
an expert level gaslighter of myself.
absolutely. Yes. I think I
Oh,
wake up like that.
yeah, no. So that's why it's like, no, you got to do what they say. And I mean, truthfully, it is. I promised my therapist I would talk about him on every single episode because I really want to help. I really want to do what I can to normalize like how important therapy is, and
Hmm.
it definitely is tough, right? And so
Hmm.
it's hard to find. Like it sounds like you've got a really nice therapist that, or like someone that you connect with. I don't know if it
Hmm.
took you a long time to get there. Like it definitely. And I had a really wonderful therapist like decades ago. First was like trying to prioritize my mental health, and it took me. I met with three people before I got to her.
Hmm.
Then I moved to New York, and took three people again actually before I got to my
Hmm.
current therapist.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. Like it was worth it because
It's
now
tough.
yeah. Yes. And it's like, and in I, it's the same thing for like physical docters. I don't like this person. I go to another one.
Hmm.
So maybe that's like, maybe hopefully if anybody out there needs to hear that,
Right. Right.
like go to the people that you like. It is, you are worth finding someone that you connect with, and then listen to whatever they say. So
And
my,
it's okay to say, no, this person doesn't fit or
mm-hmm,
doesn't suit me. It's okay to say that. Like,
yeah,
don't just say, okay, this is fine. No, it has to be like, no, this seems good. This seems
yeah,
great.
totally.
I'm on my second therapist. My first one got me through like the worst 3 years of my life,
Mm-hmm.
which love her, will always credit her to that. And the only reason I left was I started to come upon some cultural stuff. And so I needed a
Mm-hmm.
therapist who had a background culturally, ethnically like mine. And sadly, there's only two of us, two Filipino therapists that I know of in Nashville, and I'm one, and
Oh
she's my therapist. The other
my
one's my,
gosh. Gosh.
yeah. So, yeah, she's great, but it takes time, and to build rapport takes time. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen in the first session, and it
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Yeah.
You've
Right.
got to get to know each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean it's like, I mean it's like relationships, right? It's like definitely you
Hmm.
want to trust your gut. Give it a couple of sessions to see
Yeah.
if we're gonna be able to, do we just need to build rapport? Do we just need to like to kind of like find a vibe?
Right. Right.
Yeah, if it does, obviously, if it does get to a point where you're continually going back, and it feels like this person is just not getting you on like on a
Hmm.
fundamental, we just said we want you to listen to your
Yeah.
therapist. So
Yeah.
let's make sure.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we find someone that is, truly able to talk to you through all of those aspects of your personality and of
I
your life.
mean, it's something to say that you've had your therapist, the same therapist now for how many years,
Yeah,
right?
almost 8 years. I have been talking to my,
Wow.
yeah.
I can only dream of having a client, the same client for 8 years. I have a couple that swear they're going to be here forever. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I feel like I truly feel like I am the poster child for Therapeutic Alliance because
Yes.
I really have. I mean, and once you build that amount of rapport,
Hmm.
I mean, there's nothing like even if I wanted to, even if I wanted to hide something, which because I think I'm an oldest daughter, like I have a lot of trauma. There's like it is my instinct if I'm like if something is bothering me to protect it to keep it to myself. I mean,
Right.
like I usually will want to like think things through before I like present them, and that's just not even possible with my therapist anymore. Like show up to sessions sometimes thinking to myself, we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to wait. I need
Right.
to stew about it. We're going to wait, and then it'll just like it comes like out of my mouth, and so which
Right. Right.
is important because there's no reason that it should stew for a while because
Right.
it's actually just gonna like it's just eating away at me.
It's going to get worse. Yeah.
Get to it. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot, if you have, once you've built that level of rapport, I mean, he knows, like, I can walk into the room or, like, get on Zoom and he's like, what's going on? And so,
Right.
and I, like, need that. Like, again, as a person who is, which I don't know, people might not know this about me. Like, I'm actually fairly extroverted, but when it comes to personal stuff, I'm not gonna, like, share
Hmm.
it with really anybody.
Sure.
That's why I go to a therapist because
Yeah.
this person can't tell my secrets to anyone.
Right. Right. Right.
Which
Right.
I always say that to people when they like, and I don't know if this happens to you. Like we're in this space where you would think there would be more people who are going to therapy, and still
Hmm.
there's a lot of like colleagues are hesitant to go to their own therapy, and I'm always find that a little bit odd.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You know how many grad school cohorts I had that had never been to therapy and were becoming therapists? I'm
Becoming
like, this has
therapist,
to be mandatory. This
it
has to be
should.
mandatory.
It's
At
so
least a semester,
helpful. Yeah,
right? Like, know what it's like to sit in the other chair.
yes, if yes, for A, you know what it's like, but B
Right.
also because you could probably
You
use
need
it.
it.
Could use it.
You
We
will.
all
If
could.
you don't
All
yet,
of
you
us.
will.
Oh my gosh. But I always that nothing else. Tell people all the time. They took an oath. They can't tell anybody.
You
You can
can't.
tell
You
them all their
cannot.
secrets, and it's just
Right.
like, thank goodness I got that off my chest, and now it's on him. He's got
Right.
to figure out how to
Right.
carry it. So yeah. So like
Yeah.
TLDR, therapy and peer support, a combo of both, and we're gonna put lots of links to resources in the show notes. But I mean, yeah, I just think, and that's another
Yeah.
thing. That's another thing that actually I think I just saw. I'm just gonna like reference. I think I just saw a clip of Anderson Cooper talking about this. That
His podcast is fabulous. Just also not to compete, but I'm
no, but
telling you,
honestly,
it's
like
good
again,
on
I
grief.
think everybody like let's get as many resources out to you all. But he was referencing the fact. I think he was referencing a study or just was saying like just know at this point that things like this, things like grief, heavy traumatic, experiences that we're carrying to truly heal, to truly recover, to truly move forward, there's no way to do it other than talking through it. I mean, so
Right.
for better or for worse, so I know that that's like tough sometimes for folks who are more reserved and shy, but
Hmm.
this is really the way. This is really the only way
Right.
to like,
Right.
I mean, of course, on top of that, like you'll find your own like self-care routines
Hmm.
and you find what works for you, but really to get to the root of this you have to talk, and so
Yeah.
that's why we're really pushing like the two avenues of
Right.
talk, peer and mental health professional.
One other thing I just thought of to tell therapists about grief and support is the best piece of advice I was ever given in internship was you have to disclose at the right moments about yourself with your
Mm.
clients to build trust.
Mm-hmm.
They won't trust you otherwise. And I'm not bragging, but this is just a testament to how true that is, because I had 17 clients in internship, and every one of them I still have. They followed
Wow.
me. And
Wow.
through
Yeah.
2 internships and then a job, and price increases and changes and
Yes.
locations, and
Wow.
it, just that it absolutely works, because if they can
Hmm.
connect to you like that, they won't. They found their person,
They found their
their
person.
therapist.
Yes,
They found their
exactly.
therapist, and it's so incredibly important. And it's not, I had my loss survivors know I'm a loss survivor.
Yeah.
If I lost a mom and they lost a mom, they know I lost a mom. Even those who didn't lose someone to suicide but lost a parent tragically, or someone tragically, unexpectedly, it's like we still connect,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because the loss is traumatic.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's again that kind of that like links it back to the power of peer support, because
Mm-hmm.
you automatically know this person,
Right.
open up to this person about this because they understand it. So you
Right.
do need all of that in therapy as well. You do
Yeah, we have
need
to
to.
remove the shame.
Yes, exactly. And so this person is carrying something really big. They only want to give it to deserving eyes. Like they only want to give
Right.
it to someone who
No
actually like,
judgment.
yes, exactly. So thank you for pointing that out. I think, and I mean, again, and I suppose we could like get into a whole
Oh,
conversation
I
just
know.
in like
So
training
much.
therapists. But I mean, I think I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I know that is something for, especially for newer therapists, the
Right.
where kind of like trying to find out when is it appropriate to disclose and how much to
Mm-hmm.
disclose. And so I think you
Oh, that's
just,
what we're taught. Don't disclose. Don't
mhm,
disclose. I'm like, how are you a human in the room with a human
right.
if you don't ever disclose something?
Yeah. These are the folks that you want to connect with. Like, give them a reason to open up to you,
Yeah.
really. It's,
And who better than a peer who has been through
yeah.
exactly this?
Yeah.
And you don't have to say all the words because they know all the words.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You
It's
don't have to utter the things that you don't want to, because they already know.
that that is That's powerful stuff. See, this is why you are in the fancy chair with the fancy degree. Oh, thank you. Like that's really important. And I was just so I'm thinking as we're talking, I'm like, so we're like both long-term loss survivors and both very embedded in this work. So it's not that I hope don't take away that you absolutely have to go into like start your own nonprofit to work with folks after suicide, or go to
Right.
get a new degree and switch your career. But
Don't be weird like us. We're achieving.
feel free to be weird, but you don't have
This
to.
might be part of the trauma, is just keep finding bigger things to get involved in.
I don't know. It is like I don't know, because like you mentioned that you're like that people say to you like, why do you keep putting yourself back into it? And I don't know. For me, it's been a long time. The connections that I have with folks no longer those when I'm talking to a loss survivor or attempt survivor, those stories are not weighing on me and pulling on my
Mm-hmm.
story anymore. I think maybe
Right.
initially that's not anymore. It's just I feel like it's maybe this is part of it for you, or maybe not. It's totally fine if we're different here. But like for me, I just feel like no one else what we touched on. So few people want to talk about suicide. I really love to talk about suicide just because I have been talking about it for so long.
Right.
My
Who
husband,
else is going to do it?
yeah, who else is
Right.
going to
No
do
one
it?
wants to do it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do it. I actually really enjoy these conversations. I find that you I mean, look at your experience. Like you're a completely different person for, in a lot of different ways, good and bad, but you're a completely different person than who you
Mm-hmm.
were 25 years ago.
Right.
And it's so beautiful, so powerful. My husband and I were recently like headed out to like go to a thing that was going to be like a lot of like, chit chat, small talk with like people that we
Mm-hmm.
don't really know. And it's funny because I definitely, again, I mentioned like I'm more of an extroverted person, and
Mm-hmm.
I maybe 15 years ago that would have been my jam. But I was like, felt so awkward, and I said to my husband, I was like, I like don't know how to talk to people anymore without like knowing their trauma or
Right.
like having
Right.
the conversation be about trauma. Like otherwise I don't know
Right.
how to just like
Show me
make
your
normal,
realness.
yeah, I don't know how to like have just like normal chit chat anymore. So I was like, all right, I don't know what to do with that. But I mean, anyways, for me it's like it's truly the power of this community and being able to, I mean, if I can, like to do my part to bring everyone together. So
Mm-hmm.
we did, you kind of touched on like the grand finale is that you're now working with me with Pillar with our new organization. Nikki is our board president, so very excited to have you on board. That's what we're doing is those initial one-on-one conversations, putting new loss survivors, new attempt survivors can reach out to us. The website link will be in the show notes, where you can let us know that you would like to talk to someone. We'll be able to match you with a volunteer who's a few years out. So again, we never forget these experiences, so they'll definitely be able to connect with you. But we'll be able to mention to you, okay, so this is what was helpful to me, or this is what wasn't helpful to me. These are some books that I like. These are some websites, like we were just talking, like different support groups. We're still really small and really new, so probably won't be able to match you with someone right in your town or even possibly right in your state. But and again, maybe Nikki, you can elaborate. Like, you can actually make really powerful connections over Zoom or over the phone.
Yep.
Especially again when it's like something like this, where you're talking to someone for the first time. Usually this is the first loss survivor you're connecting with. It's really lovely to be able to just that instant connection.
Right. It's healing.
It is.
It starts the healing. It's like the first step.
Yeah. So I suppose we should probably start to think about closing this conversation.
We could do this all day.
If I'm talking with folks, I usually like to mention self-care, or just either if you have an intense conversation with someone, maybe you need something to shake it off, or if you're just having a day, what are some things for you?
I love when people ask me that, because for a long time it was like, I'm going to go sit in the tub. And it's like, self-care is bigger than that. It's like, I haven't in a while because work is crazy, but I like to hike or go on long walks, whatever. But that is nature's EMDR. If you look up EMDR, you're processing and you're doing an activity, and those two sides of your brain are working.
Life hack.
Yeah, it is. It's free too. I love my dogs. I love my pets. Animals heal you without even knowing they're doing it. Sundays are laundry days and preparing for the week. So cooking is also a lot of self-care. Getting lost in that is really, I like doing that too, and focusing on something. And then just kind of breathing. I watch a lot of shows that are not relaxing, like, Dexter, some sordid documentaries. And I will tell you, most therapists do that. We're watching things that we're like, don't you want to turn your brain off from that? You're like, oh no, give me more. Because we're hoping this will never happen in our therapy rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and connecting, talking to my children, talking, or laughing with my children, usually is what it is. Simple things. And yeah, you can have a glass of wine. Yes, you can sit in the tub. Yes, you can go have, I like to call it trauma shopping. Don't get crazy, but go buy yourself something if you want. Good food. Yeah. Things like that.
All smart. Yeah. And I think it's so important to have a list too. Because sometimes hiking, how it's the best one, but it's not something you can do every day. So what are you gonna reach for instead? So good call.
Yeah.
I love all of that. I think. Well, first, what else do you wish you could say, either to a new loss survivor who is hesitant to reach out, or even what you need to hear if somebody had been able to get through to you, so you didn't have to wait 8 years before reaching out for support. What would have worked for you to hear back then, or what do you think somebody needs to really hear if they're on the fence about taking any next steps? Not a big one.
That is such a big question. Yeah, I thought about this all night. What did I need to hear? Gosh. I think I just needed, I don't know if I needed to hear it or feel it, but I just needed to know that the enormity of my grief was not too much. And I'm not leaving you because it's so big. If someone had just told me that, I wouldn't have stuffed it down for 8 years, and I wouldn't have hidden that, and I wouldn't have like all this unpacking still to this day to do around that, and worth and deserving and abandonment, and like that sticks with you. If someone could have just said that or
Absolutely.
made me feel that way,
Yeah.
I don't care how many times you have to talk about this. I don't care if you repeat the same things over and over and over again and ask the same why question over and over again. I don't care. Just be safe
Yeah.
here. And knowing that this one person is not going to leave you because of it. You know, like if I just had that.
Oh, you're going to make me cry. That was so
I know.
beautiful.
I know. I just wish I had that. That poor young
Yes.
25-year-old who was on the cusp of like every huge milestone in life, like marriage and babies and house buying and careers and more losses and divorces, and not divorces, one divorce, you know, kids growing up. And yeah, like I didn't have a mom to prepare me for all of that. And so I just wish that somebody could have just told me it's okay to feel the gravity of that.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yes, exactly. And look at you have become that person that who would
Yeah.
be able to say that to her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. I don't think I've talked to that girl in like this might be the first year that I
Yeah.
actually am like acknowledging her and what she
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah. Do
And
you
it's through the eyes of other clients too. Like I'm done, like I'm not gonna say I'm done healing, but my healing now is from clients and other loss survivors. Like I'm learning from them now.
Yeah. Do you this is such a self-serving question. I might take this out. Every human on this planet could go to a therapist and work through, like talking to their inner child, healing their inner child.
So much.
Yeah. But when you just mentioned that this might be the first time you're talking to your 25-year-old self, like I also have been feeling it's not so much my child anymore. She's gotten a lot of care and love. Even like we've made it through high school it's like college age Shannon who like
Yeah.
needs some comfort.
Yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned that it's
Right.
like about the same situation that like early 20s when
Mm-hmm.
which is
Oh, we talked about this in therapy. My 20s were fabulous. Of course, it was where it
oh
was. And then at 25, it
oh
wasn't fabulous anymore. It got really
yeah.
bad really fast, right?
So
But
that's
yeah, like
the
the
Nikki that
flip
needs
was
yeah.
fast.
Okay. That's the
No
Nikki that
preparation.
needs some help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. She thought life was great in a big city and like, and then all of a sudden life was not great anymore. And that took
life.
over. Yeah.
God bless.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that she gets to have you now, or she will
Yeah.
have you soon when you're ready
Right.
to connect. Anything else you want to leave us with before you want to tell us about your mom?
My mom was the classic Filipino mom who was a little bit scary. Also, like would fight for anybody
Mm.
hand in, whatever. She'd strong arm. She was 4'11", but she'd scare you. And she was scary and she had a big yelling voice and a big, huge laugh. But then like she just like if you were a kid that like any of my teenage friends who didn't have a place to go or felt alienated at home, she was like, come live at our house for a month. Like, that's just how she was, like
Oh.
she just took everyone in, but she'd also
Hmm.
scare you a little bit. Like
Yes.
you weren't getting away with anything just because you had a tough time.
Yes.
So I do love that about her. And
Yeah.
I find that I'm kind of becoming the same person, this compassionate, warm, tough love mom. Like
Hmm.
my kids have told me that, like, you're a little scary mom. Like, oh, good. It's working. Because you're
Love.
boys and you're
Yes.
both taller than me. So I'm
Yes.
glad.
It's like love comes out a little scary sometimes. That's
Probably a whole other therapy session. But when I was scrolling this morning past all the, sordid
yes.
things that we talked about
The
that we're
things,
seeing on the
the things
internet
that are out there. Be
today,
careful. Scroll at your own risk. Truly.
there was one thing that popped out, and it was, and it reminded me of the question of you asking, what would you tell yourself, or what did you need to hear, or, what do you need to know? And for some, this is going to be very difficult because it's a new loss and you can't even fathom seeing this. But where maybe you and I are, it's a look back and like, yeah, we understand this now. And I promise you will hopefully get there someday. But it's by one of my favorite poets named Andrea Gibson. And they said, it is absolutely possible to make a clearing of the fog. Keep asking yourself this question. What love can I make of this loss? And I'm like, yeah, I've asked myself that question for years, which is why I keep volunteering, why I went to grad school, why I have 40 plus clients. I just keep learning and going because I need to make sense of it.
Yeah. It's so true. And because that's what grief is love. It's all the love that we still have. It's all the love that we don't get to give to this person who's not here. So I love that. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for
having
sharing.
me.
Yeah, I'm so happy you were here. Thank you for sharing so much about yourself and your mama and ending on such a beautiful quote. We'll have to put that in the show notes too for folks. This was the first one. Who knows how we did? You're great. I don't know. We'll see.
I think you did great. I think we did great. I think being able to like talk openly about this makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
Just make it a good podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, it was hopefully, it was probably good and bad, right? That you and I are so moved from our losses, so like comfortable in this space.
Yeah.
It's probably good and bad because it's like on the one hand, I know sometimes that like those, it's jarring to new loss survivors, like the idea that like, oh my gosh,
you're going to go on.
Yeah. I didn't even think that it's like, I'll make it to 25 years and also be looking at that, but I hope that, and I'll probably try to like frame something in the opening and the closing of just like, I hope that, people will just, see that this is something that what we're ultimately trying to do is like integrate this into our life.
Right. You have to.
You have to.
You have to. It's not going away. I'm sorry. It's not. Yeah.
Well, what was that? What somebody about how it's not that like if grief is a weight that you're carrying, it's not that eventually the weight gets smaller, but that you get stronger from carrying it because you've just like you've built up the muscles. Like you have to make the adjustments to life to like keep moving forward. So, anyways, oh my God, thank you. That's a wrap. Thank you all. Thank you for being here, for listening to us. Thank you again to Nikki for being so open and so vulnerable with us, for sharing such insightful information. Every time we talk, I find it I always leave with something more. So thank you so much. For those of you listening, please feel free to reach out to me. If you have any feedback, questions, comments, you can reach me at shannon@pillar-peer.org. Please follow us on Instagram, on Facebook. We'll have all of those links below. Obviously, this was a pretty focused on the Nashville area, so I'm hopeful that was helpful to those of you who are local, but certainly anyone who is listening who is wondering when the heck are we going to start talking about supports and resources in your area, please stay tuned. There are loss survivors and attempt survivors all over this country, and many are lined up already to speak with me on this podcast. So we'll be coming to you pretty regularly, pretty soon. I say that just because I am still in the process of figuring out how exactly to upload all of this. We're coming to you as quickly as we possibly can, but in the meantime, reach out to me, please. Feel free. Pillar is here for you, and so if there are resources or supports that you have questions about, we can send links over to you right away. If you'd like to connect with one of our peer volunteers, please reach out for that as well. Thank you again for being here. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing so that you can make sure to find out that there are new episodes coming quickly. Please also, if you could give us a good rating, that would be really helpful too. I know that that is particularly important for new podcasts so that it can get in the hands of and ears of those who need it most. Again, this is This is such an important topic. I know it's pretty difficult. I know it can be pretty heavy for folks. So please, if you've listened through the whole episode, take a moment for yourself afterwards if you can. I really appreciate you being here, and I look so forward to us connecting soon. Thank you.